Today I'm sharing a video with you of a painting that I struggled with more than any painting that I have done. I scraped the face of this hawk off twice, so I ended up painting it 3 times. I didn't like the way that the feather patterns were looking. I could not get the drawing to stay on. I'm still trying this new Alla prima style that I'm not used to. So as I was painting, I was fighting the wet paint and the drawing. I lost the drawing. I wasn't slowing down as one should when doing Alla prima. So I was just kind of going with a free-for-all sort of approach, which is kind of how I normally paint. And I lost the drawing, and then I lost it again. The eyes were just bothering me. I ended up not liking the eyes, the colors. The drawing was just all over the place. So I kind of rage quit yesterday and thought about it and decided to start it all over again, try it again. And this actually is the 3rd time I've painted this. I actually painted this last year and put it in an exhibit, and it ended up getting People's Choice Award, but I didn't love how stiff and formal it kind of turned out. It didn't have any freshness or looseness, so I thought it would be fun to try it a la prima style. And that was really tough. There's a lot of precision, of course, that goes into an animal portrait. Part of the problem is that I don't really have appropriate brushes for painting smaller like this. I've usually painted really large paintings, so I don't need to get in that really super tiny detail. For instance, on the eyes. The eyes were the biggest struggle with me on the hawk. And the eyes on any animal or person portrait need to be really, really accurate. So if I'm going to be doing paintings like this, I need to buy a couple of different brushes that have a smoother, finer tip. So that was a big struggle for me. I'll go ahead and let the video start, and then I have about 4 more tips that I'll share with you at the end, things that I learned, things that I would do different, and my advice for you if you're trying alla prima painting. So enjoy the video. I'll see you at the end. So I start out with my regular palette with a couple of my new colors, the ivory black and the cerulean, and I thought for this one, I never really liked the background in my original painting, so I thought maybe I'd do a hint of some mountains and some cool blues, cool purples to be a nice complement to the warm colored bird. This is a juvenile harrier hawk. So just getting in this rendition and the first rendition of this painting, I had the light source coming from the top left. When I repainted it today, I decided to have the light coming from the bottom right. I thought it was kind of difficult. The top of the bird's head is pretty dark because he has so many little dark feathers that are close together on the top of his head. So having the light source come from the top onto those dark feathers made for kind of difficult shading because the feathers are dark, but that's supposed to be the lightest part. So I thought I'd just go easier on the second one and try having the light source from a different spot. I think it did help a little. I'm already struggling with the eyes here. A little bit big, and I end up not loving that color I'm putting on under the cheeks. I'm trying to get some shadow under there because of where the light is coming from. I should have also checked my source photo a little bit better. When I drew the beak, when I looked at the photo really carefully again today, it's actually just a printer copy, so it's not a very good reference photo. But I saw that the beak and the whole structure of the beak is more complex than I had realized before. So I think I did a better job of drawing it today. In this one that I did yesterday, I struggled with not just the eyes, but also getting the beak to look just right. So I'm trying to get some texture in the feathers. And get those streaks. And as usual, they end up just looking kind of pasted on. It's really hard to get those dark streaks to look like they belong in the feathers. And you can see I lost the drawing of the foot, that right foot completely. I had to go back and adjust that greatly. Yeah, doing those tail feathers is kind of fun. The pattern on those is much easier because they're not layered, I guess. Trying to get the feet back in order. The one on the left, I lost the drawing a little bit. It really shouldn't be, the foot itself shouldn't be lifted up quite that high, which also I realized later, and that was kind of annoying. They got a lot more spots in there. They still look very artificial and just kind of plopped in there. Trying to get the eyes back. The dark paint, which was a mix of ultramarine crimson, alizarin crimson, and I think I had some of the, maybe even Mars black and the purple in there to get that dark, but I would go back and forth between putting the yellow in, and then some of the black would get mixed into the yellow, so then I'd have to go back and do the black again, and then the yellow would get mixed up, and I'm just, my tiniest brush that I'm using there, it's just a cheap brush from Walmart that came out of like a children's set, but it's the only soft, fine brush that I have for doing this tiny detail, so it's definitely not ideal. I'm getting a little better definition on the eye there. And I'm going in to do the feathers. And then I decide I hate the face and I scrape it off. So then I try again. I scraped it all the way down so I could see the drawing again. Decide this time to start with the yellow eye color. The first time I started with the dark around the eyes, so I'm trying the opposite this time. And it's also really hard because I do not have a maul stick, which you can prop up above your painting, and then you can rest your hand on that so you're not sticking your hand in your wet paint. That was also very frustrating. There's some equipment I probably need to invest in if I'm going to be doing Alla prima. The eyes in this rendition end up looking even funnier. They end up too close together and they look cartoonish, which is kind of amusing, but definitely not what I was going for. It totally looks like a cartoon there. And I should have been checking my drawing, checking my reference photo, checking the drawing. I'm so focused on trying to get that color in the eyes right that I don't even notice till I step back. That's another really good tip, is while you're painting, step back and check. Another thing I found that's really useful is to take a photo of the painting and look at the photo. I've noticed mistakes many times after I've taken the photo of the painting, and that's really interesting. So I think from now on I'm going to start just photographing it, and that has two benefits. One, you can see the mistakes, and two, you get a little break stepping back from the painting. And I scraped it off again. Now I start all over again. It looks like an owl now, which is interesting because when you read about harrier hawks, they are described as having an owl-like head. They have a flatter, whiter head than most hawks. So it's not completely wrong, but so I'm struggling. At this point, I probably should have stopped. I was getting really, really frustrated and tired. My camera was running out of battery. And I go for this crazy blue color. This is what happens when you get tired. You just start throwing things at the wall and hoping they stick. Well, I was getting a little annoyed because that little patch that's up on top of the beak just wasn't standing out, so I think I just grabbed the blue, just take that. Now you'll have to stand out your cerulean blue. Looks like I pulled it back a little. It's not looking terrible at this point. It's just that the color shouldn't be so white. I was also getting frustrated and not getting a high enough value, so I started reaching for the white, which is always a mistake because then it just looks chalky and definitely not realistic. And I'm struggling with the eye again. Put in some black, lose the yellow, put in the yellow, lose the black. I'm hating the color right there. The rest of it I don't really hate. The drawing on the legs isn't quite right. And here's today. I decided to change this third iteration of this composition, and because the hawk with its wing spread is almost completely square, it could really go vertical or horizontal, and I don't have any square canvases. So this time I changed a couple things. This is a canvas board rather than stretched canvas, and you can see I changed it to be a horizontal composition, and there's my reference. It's just a ratty old printout. And I'm going with yellow first for the eyes, and being very nervous at this point because now I'm on the third try. This is, if you count the times I scraped off the face of this, there was the first painting last year, 3 faces I painted yesterday, and now this is technically the 4th time I've painted this hawk's face, so I'm feeling a little nervous about getting it right, but I'm determined. I was more careful with my underdrawing too, sketched that very carefully, and instead of, I tend to really trust my drawing skills, so I often don't make a really super defined underdrawing. I can draw as I go, but since I struggled so much with this, I didn't want to take any chances on this last attempt. I knew I wouldn't have patience to do this one more time. Trying to get that, keep the paint out using another really cheapy brush from Walmart, and getting the black in. These are kind of complex areas. And now I'm approaching that beak with much more seriousness. I realize how complex the structure of it is. I'm trying really hard to get that absolutely correct and get the values correct. I'm using kind of a bluish purple. The beak is mostly black in real life, but there's a lot of reflection on it. And then where the beak transitions to the skin, it is kind of gray. And get my big brush out. Phew, it's a relief. I got my eyes in, so now I can do the background. I decided to just do a random background. I didn't try to do mountains or anything on this version. I'm liking that purple color. I did change my palette for this. I left out the Mars Black, I left out the purple, and I left out the cerulean. I just went with just my basic colors that I've used for years. I decided I didn't need to be fancy and just wanted to solve some problems and try one more time with this guy. Kind of liking how bright that that color is. I think that's some yellow ochre, cadmium yellow. Oh, maybe just a tiny hint of cadmium red. Just get that sort of orange. So this time I'm having the light come from the lower right. So I'm thinking about that while I put that shadow up on top of the head. Then he's got all these really dark, thin feathers up there that I'm trying to figure out how to paint without just looking like pinstriping. That thin little line on the lip, that I guess you call it a lip on a bird. That mouth structure is something I also wasn't careful with and lost in previous attempts at this painting. So I was trying to be very, very careful to get the entire head structure right, not just the eyes. So putting some shadow there on top of the breast, because the sun coming up from below would create some shadow there. Then I kind of accidentally made this really interesting green using yellow ochre and ultramarine blue, and although I didn't really love that reddish color I put up on the top of the wing, I realized I really liked that green, so I go ahead and use some of that green. I make some more and use that again as a shadow color. And I'm not worrying too much about the feet here. I know those will be kind of complicated and leave them for the last. And here comes the purple that I regretted. Yeah, that was a bad idea. And I painted over it. So you can see a hint of it still there. So I go with adding the light colors on the feathers first, on the tail feathers. I lost a little of the drawing later in that transition between the body feathers and the tail feathers. These soft feathers that connect the body to the tail and the underneath of the tail feathers. So this part goes okay. Just trying to get some form in there, get my values. Now it's time to do the stripes on the feathers. I accidentally got a big blob of dark where I didn't want it, so had to deal with that. I think this is where my main camera ran out of batteries, so I'm using my phone here, and I apologize I didn't get it centered very well, but I really was on a roll and wanted to finish filming. I'm using on those fluffy feathers that are on the legs, on the backs of the legs, I was using a really old, destroyed oil brush, a hog bristle brush, because I, for once, didn't need crispness. I wanted to have that frayed, fluffy kind of look there. It actually worked pretty well. And I go back to messing with the head. Terrified I'm going to ruin the eyes again. Then I try with feather patterns, and I'm hating how they're just sitting on top like they always do. So I need to work on that. I'm just continuing to work on the form, feathers. Get some of the texture of the feathers in there. And that's about it for today. And here are some comparisons. The two birds together. The one yesterday on the right, the one today on the left. So here's 4 things that I learned besides the brushes that I need to buy. I need some better brushes. One of them is I need to learn how to do feather pattern. It seems like feathers. I've done a lot of dog portraits, and fur isn't a big problem for me at all. But getting the form of the bird with patterns within the feathers seems to be a big challenge. If you just put the stripes or the dots on top, it looks like it's on the surface, doesn't really look like it's part of the bird. So I do need to get better at that, so I'm going to research that. And I wrote these down. The next thing that I need to learn, and I might have mentioned this in other Alla Prima, this is my first Alla Prima painting that I did, is I need to be more decisive with color. I've been painting for decades, and I've always loved to put some color on and then put some more color on and mix it on the canvas and kind of scrub it in thinly, and then I let it dry and I paint in layers, so I'm not dealing with wet paint. The Alla Prima style with the hawk's eyes, I was dealing with a lot of wet paint in there, and that was hard to deal with. And I also, you can see at one point in the video, I added some purple color in for the shadow of the bird, and that did not look right at all because the bird was mostly yellow, and then I was using a complementary color. I tend to want this kind of drama, so I tend to go toward complementary colors when I shouldn't. So I had to paint over that with more of a deep yellow color. So I need to be more decisive with my colors and plan a little bit better. And also, if you're painting wet on wet, actually any painting, but it seems like the wet in wet method, it's easy to lose your drawing as you go, so I should have been checking my drawing more as I went. That's why I ended up scraping the face off twice, because I lost the drawing. The eyes ended up really crazy looking. And I lost the drawing again today in the third iteration of this painting a little bit. I ended up having to add one tail feather. I lost the drawing on the feet, but I reminded myself to take time, check my reference, and get the drawing back. And I think I did pretty well on that today. And my last tip is don't rush. I do have a tendency to rush and just want to fly in there with the paint and put it on, and I tend to put the paint on and then see what happens after I put it on, instead of really planning and thinking about the color, the value, the hue, and so more planning would be good. Anyway, let me know what you think, and I don't know why I decided to try all these new things and make a lot of mistakes as soon as I started making YouTube videos, but it is kind of fun to see other people struggling a little and how the mistakes are fixed. Hope you enjoyed. And if you're interested in some of my past and present work, check out my website at danellekelly.art. And I hope you join me for future videos. I do vlogs every week out in our Alaska wilderness, and I'd love it if you subscribe. And take care, be creative, and have fun.